February 24th, 1986, Van Nuys, California. 29-year-old nurse supervisor and newlywed Sherri Rasmussen kisses her husband John Ruetten goodbye at 7:20 in the morning, saying she's thinking of calling in sick. When John arrives home that night around 6 p.m., his beautiful wife is dead, beaten and shot 3 times at close range. When police arrive, they decide unilaterally this is a robbery gone bad. But was it? 26 years, a family that refused to accept the case was cold, and long-lost DNA would turn this murder case and the LAPD on its head. This is the murder of Sherri Rasmussen. 3 bullets, a bite, and a broken heart. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends from Friesland.
Where's Friesland?
Wait. Welcome.
Oh, sounds a little bit like German.
Well,
some of the others.
Frisian speakers, they live in the Netherlands and primarily in the province of Friesland. So, they're over there in Netherlands.
You know what? This is educational. Every week.
I like to spread a little.
You do a good job every single week.
Yeah, I'm trying to make up for all the times I didn't pay attention in high school class.
I doubt that was very often.
Well, okay. Moving on.
Okay. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to like, rate, review, subscribe. You can watch us on YouTube. Be sure to join the In-Laws and Outlaws. That's our closed Facebook group.
Yep.
We love everybody in there. Welcome. Sure do. Welcome to all our new In-Laws and Outlaws, and welcome to all of our new YouTube subscribers. Yeah. We see you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
We've gone over 200 now.
We have.
We're pretty excited about that.
We are. We do not at all ever advertise this podcast. No. We just don't advertise it. I'll post it on social media. Everything that we have, all of you that listen, it's been word of mouth. We appreciate you, or being suggested by Spotify or another podcast platform. But we do really appreciate you guys so much. You'll never know.
Y'all are the OGs.
You are. We have some real OGs in that family of the In-Laws and Outlaws. Yeah. We salute you.
Yep.
Well, this is a whopper of a case.
Okay.
Let me tell you, I hate to say that I enjoyed researching this, but I enjoyed researching this.
Really?
You know, obviously someone's dead.
All right.
But this is like an ongoing saga, and it just kept getting a little bit more interesting and a little bit more interesting. And I really hope I do this story justice. I really do.
It sounds like a good one.
It is. And I'm going to jump right in. And before I do, let's thank some sources: the LA Times, Ranker, CBS News, Dateline NBC, the Daily Mail, Murderpedia, Wikipedia, the Los Angeles Magazine, Vanity Fair, Ventura County Star, and there is a book, The Lazarus Files. I did not read it. It is the true crime book about this case. It's by Matthew Mageau, and I will have a link to it and all the other sources in the show notes.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Okay, let's do it.
Sherri Ray Rasmussen is born on February 24th, 1957 in Walla Walla, Washington.
Walla Walla.
Walla Walla, Washington, to Dr. Nels Elmer Rasmussen Jr. and Loretta Lehman Rasmussen. Okay. She's the middle sister to Teresa and Connie. The family lives in Tucson, Arizona. Her dad is a dentist.
Oh, okay.
Sherri is very smart. She's very athletic. She's the kind of young woman that doesn't do anything halfway. Like, she is so smart and so accomplished. She actually skips 2 grades in high school and graduates and enters college and nursing school at the age of, wait for it, 16.
Good grief.
She is a smart cookie.
Wow. At 16, I was worried about what we were going to have for lunch.
I was worried about what I was going to wear. Let's be real.
Yeah.
It was the 80s. Yeah. Which frosted lip gloss was going to look best with my outfit. I did not wear all the neons. Whenever they have an 80s party, all the kids wear the neons. That was not the big hair. Yes. The neon, not so much. Not so much.
A little Cyndi Lauper, right?
Yeah. Big hair, no neon.
Yeah.
Not really the neon.
Yeah.
I digress. But Sherri's really tall and thin. She's 6 feet tall. 6 feet tall.
Wow.
And her father, the dentist, wanted Sherri to be a doctor, but she wanted a husband and a family, and that was more important to her than going to medical school.
Right.
So she heads off to school at Loma Linda University in Southern California, but when she's finished at the age of 20, her parents think it's too dangerous for her to take a job and to live in Los Angeles.
Okay.
But according to her parents and her sisters, nobody was going to tell Sherri what to do, which I love about this girl. I love so much about this girl.
Yep.
But because they believe LA is dangerous, they help her buy a condo in a gated community called Balboa Townhomes in Van Nuys, California.
Cut me, Mick.
I knew you were going to say that. When I saw that, I was like, there's going to be a Rocky reference coming in hot. Coming in hot.
Okay.
Sherri will share this condo for 3 years with her good friend and fellow nurse, Jane Goldberg. They're both adorable. I've seen pictures of the two of them. It's a tall up and down condo. So the living room's on the bottom floor, the kitchen and the dining room are on the middle floor, and the bedrooms are on the top. And the basement was a 2-car garage.
Okay.
So they're all like stacked up side by side.
Right.
Sherri's doing so well in her job, she's a nursing supervisor by the time she's 26.
Nice.
And by the time she's 27 in 1984, she's in nursing management at Glendale Adventist Medical Center.
Okay.
Sherri had a wonderful life. She was happy. She was single. This girl was a world beater, and I am not kidding you.
She had the world by the tail.
She did. Yeah. Now, meet John Ruetten. John, who is from San Diego, enrolls in 1977 at UCLA. And while he's there, he lives in a co-ed dorm, as many of us did. And he became friends and hung out with a lot of the guys and the girls who lived in the Dykstra dormitory.
Okay.
A year later, in 1978, a new girl moved into John's dorm. Her name was Stephanie Lazarus. Stephanie grew up in Southern California. She's the oldest. She's got 2 younger siblings.
Okay.
Stephanie was really athletic growing up, and when she made it to UCLA, she joined the women's JV basketball team.
Nice.
But John and Stephanie become friends. Stephanie wanted more than a friendship from John. So they became more than friends. They were friends with benefits. I usually call this something else, but to keep it clean for the podcast, they were buddies.
There you go. That's the short version.
That's the short version. They were buddies.
Yeah.
And for any of the men out there, if you've ever seen the movie Friends with Benefits, there's a great line where Woody Harrelson tells Justin Timberlake that, quote, "That never works, bro. She's a girl. Sex always means more to them, even if they don't admit it."
Right.
And Timberlake says, Jamie's different, which is exactly the way John felt about Stephanie Lazarus.
Okay.
And Woody says, quote, "Does she have a penis where most girls have a vagina? Then she's no different." And all I can say is Woody knew Stephanie Lazarus.
Yep. He called it.
There it is.
Yep.
After Stephanie graduates UCLA, she joins the LAPD. She brings her basketball game to the LAPD, and she's an aggressive player. She's really competitive.
Okay.
She's also tall. She's not 6 feet tall, but she is tall. She's lean. She's very into her body. She even bought her own bulletproof vest so she wouldn't look bulky in the one that was standard issue by the LAPD.
Where do you find a a non-bulky bulletproof vest.
You have it custom made for your small body.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So instead of, listen, now technology is crazy because I write books where men wear Kevlar suits. You just don't even know that there's Kevlar in the suit. I have a feeling politicians might wear those, but it is a thing. But she actually has one made for her body. She spent a ton of money to do this because she didn't want to look bulky.
Versace made it for her.
Well, it's LA. But she had it made so she wouldn't look bulky. She did not want to look like the men.
Right.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Now, apparently, according to John, it isn't until these two graduate that they actually do the deed, that they have sex.
Okay.
And I've read that Stephanie even threw John a 25th birthday, a surprise party. But the surprise was on her because John was dating lots of women, but had really fallen for one in particular. So I'm telling you now, John and Stephanie, this is a one-sided relationship. He's in it for the sex. She might be in it for the sex too, but she loves him. She has feelings for him.
Right.
When Stephanie gets to the LAPD, she is not interested in dating any of the men on the force, probably because she's still hung up on John Ruetten.
Right.
And after a year in 1983 at the Hollywood station, she's moved to the Devonshire station. And I was thinking that'd be kind of cool to work the Hollywood station.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not. Who knows? I mean, if you've ever been to Hollywood, you know, there's a nice part and there's a not so nice part.
Yeah. When you get to North Hollywood, that's when it gets a little dicey.
Gets a little sketch.
Yeah.
But one night in 1984, John goes to a party where he meets Sherri Rasmussen. Now, something I didn't tell you about John is that he is tall. He's really tall.
Really?
Taller than Sherri.
Oh, wow.
Which, if you're a 6-foot girl, that would be important.
Yep.
You want to wear heels.
Right.
I mean, and I think he's about 6'6", 6'5", or 6'6".
Wow.
And she's tall, she's confident. And that was a little bit intimidating for a lot of men.
It just reminds me of Vince Vaughn in Wedding Crashers when he's out on the dance floor with the girl and she goes, well, how tall are you? And he goes, I'm 6'5", but I feel so small in your arms.
I feel so tiny in your arms. Yeah. But John is really smart. He's not intimidated by her. He's very sure of himself. He's a mechanical engineer who works for a disk drive company, Micropolis.
Okay. Oh,
I'm waiting for you to say something about it's a disk drive company. It's 1986. There aren't disk drive companies anymore, are there?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. But I remember Micropolis.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had Micropolis stuff.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Of course he did, guys. He has every computer ever made. Every single one.
It's an addiction.
Yeah. Well, he works for Micropolis. He's very ambitious. He's handsome and he's athletic, just like she is. But John is 2 years younger than Sherri. And when John and Sherri Rasmussen meet, these two fall head over heels in love with each other.
And let me guess, this isn't going to turn out good.
It is a true crime podcast.
It is.
It's just over a year later that John asks Sherri to marry him. And when these two get engaged, I think they actually moved in together. He made her very happy. They are a nice-looking couple, according to her family. He doted on her. He really doted on her.
So he was smitten.
He was smitten, but so was she. So was she. So he moves into the condo with her. I mean, she owns this condo. Why wouldn't you move in there? Yeah. You know, she's set up.
Yeah.
Now, all is well with Stephanie until she finds out through the grapevine, mind you, that John is getting married. And as you might imagine, she's not happy about it.
It went over like poop in a punch bowl.
It was bad. She writes a letter to John's mother saying, quote, I'm truly in love with John, and the past year has really torn me up. I wish it didn't end the way it did, and I don't think I'll ever understand his decision. End quote. Well, he's made a decision to marry a beautiful brainiac who is like the youngest nursing supervisor ever.
Right.
I'm sure that's hard for you to comprehend. Again, she's a world beater.
Right.
She is a world beater.
Right.
Just weeks before John and Sherri are to be married, Stephanie shows up at the condo unannounced.
Oh, man.
Sherri tells her dad that Stephanie was dark-haired and athletic and that she was brazen. That's the word. She shows up in her tight Jane Fonda workout clothes with her skis.
What?
And she hands them to John past Sherri. John's standing there. And she tells him, I want you to wax my skis.
That wasn't an innuendo.
I knew you were going to say that. It's a euphemism for something else. I want you to wax my skis. There's a lot of innuendo in this too. But honey, if I show up in the bedroom tonight and tell you I want you to wax my skis, you'll know.
Okay. Noted. Committed to memory.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Now, Sherri is not happy. Sherri's the one who's not happy now.
Yeah.
And she tells her dad that the skis, they're just an excuse to show up and to see John. She's not wrong.
Right.
And when John gets home, Sherri and John have a fight about Stephanie. And John tells her, look, we were friends. Then we were friends with benefits.
Right.
But we were never serious.
Right.
And still, Sherri did not want him to wax the skis.
Yeah, well, of course.
I get it. Yeah. Every woman out there listening to the podcast is like, don't wax her skis, John.
Well, listen, every guy out there that's listening is going, dude, don't do it.
But John either didn't want to confront Stephanie. Remember, she's brazen.
Yeah.
And to say, stay away, I'm getting married, drawing those hard boundaries. Sometimes you got to do that with people who care about you when it's over. You got to draw the hard boundary.
Sure, yeah.
Or if he was just simply afraid of Stephanie, who knows? He waxed those skis.
Dumb.
Waxed the skis.
Dude, dumb.
And when he waxed them, she shows up again. This time, she's in her LAPD uniform, gun strapped to the waist, and she said she was on a break. John had gone to work and Sherri was still home. And usually it's the other way around. I mean, she's a nurse, so she was usually out of the house first.
Right.
And Sherri's wondering, is this some kind of routine? Fiance leaves for work, old girlfriend stops by. She didn't want to believe it. She wanted to trust John.
Right.
The wedding was just weeks away.
Yeah.
So she cries on the phone, telling her dad, Nels, about that night. And listen, Sherri did not cry easily. She's a tough cookie.
Right.
She talked about it more with her father when she and John visited Tucson on her birthday. And according to her dad, Nels, she said she wished John would just step in and tell this woman to leave them alone.
Yeah. Go away.
But all he would do was assure her that there was nothing going on between the two of them. And that was the best that he was going to do. Right. He says, we're just going to ignore her. Eventually, she's going to go away.
Want to bet?
Yeah, Stephanie's not going away.
No.
When she realized John was really going to get married, she called him crying hysterically. And what did John do? He drove over to Stephanie's house to console her. And what do you think happened?
They hooked up.
These two had sex.
Oh.
He's engaged to a beautiful, brilliant woman he loves. He's still hopping into bed one more time with Stephanie.
John.
How good was it? How good was the sex that you're willing to risk it all?
Yeah. Dummy.
That's what I don't know.
Yep.
After this, Stephanie shows up at the hospital to see Sherri in her office. She got into Sherri's office. She burst through the door right past Sherri's secretary and into Sherri's office. But this time she's not wearing her LAPD uniform and her sidearm. No, she's wearing tight short shorts and a tube top.
Okay.
Stephanie worked on her body a lot, and she was putting it all out there.
Oh, man.
Stephanie tells Sherri that she and John, we've had sex, that he came over to console me, and we ended up in bed.
Wow.
And she tells Sherri that when their marriage falls apart, meaning Sherri and John's,
right,
that she would be there to pick up the pieces.
Jeez.
Sherri comes home. And she needs to have a word with her fiance, John, who tells her there's nothing to it. And that, yes, he did have sex with Stephanie, but it meant nothing. So I just want to stop here. How many people have been cheated on?
Yeah.
And when they say this, but the sex meant nothing.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's probably the worst thing you can say.
Yeah. It means nothing. He didn't want them to throw away their love and their future because he did something so stupid.
Yeah.
He said he only had sex with Stephanie to, quote, give her closure, end quote.
What a guy.
Yeah. What a guy.
He took one for the team. Jeez, John.
And I wrote in my notes, I think he just wanted to go over there and knock himself off a piece.
Yeah.
That's what I think happened.
Of course.
Sorry, John. That's what I think happened. I'm going to defend you in a little bit, John, but not for this.
Yeah.
Now, it's a little muddy how many times Stephanie went to the hospital to harass Sherri, telling her if she couldn't have John, no one else will. Not only that, Sherri's new car, a BMW 318i, or is it 318?
318.
Rob's the Beamer specialist.
318.
There's one parked above my head right now. 318i. It was an engagement present from John.
Wow.
It was keyed in the hospital parking lot, and she kept getting obscene phone calls in her office.
See, I was okay until you said he keyed the BMW.
It's like kicking the puppy, man.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It's like boiling the bunny. And
Oh, yeah. Well, she does that too in that movie, in Fatal Attraction. Yeah. But poor Sherri, so she's got so much going on. She didn't know if it was Stephanie who had done this or another woman who was a disgruntled nurse who was passed over for a promotion. She made it perfectly clear to Sherri that she was not happy that she did not get the promotion.
Right.
So Sherri was concerned. She didn't know, was it this nurse?
Right.
Was it something else? So poor Sherri, she never tells her father or her sisters that John slept with this Stephanie woman, who's also a cop, just a few short weeks before the wedding.
Yeah. Dude, I just don't understand.
And, all I could think of was there have been, if you're a bride, dresses have been paid for, venues have been paid for, invitations have gone out. So I think she chose to forgive him and go forward.
Better person I would be.
Yeah. I'm telling you, world beater.
Yeah.
She was an amazing person. Sherri told her father that she's also being followed by a woman who was dressed like a man and she had wild eyes.
Okay.
That's called foreshadowing.
Okay, here we go.
We're going to have a little bit of that today.
Okay.
Even in the wake of all of this, John, she really, really must have loved you because these two get married on November 23rd, 1985.
Okay.
The next month, they spend Christmas with both sets of parents. But when they go to Arizona, they go to Tucson, it'll be the last time that family will ever be together. The last time the Rasmussen family will ever be together.
Wow.
After the new year, 1986, these two have set up housekeeping in Sherri's condo. Her sister Teresa and her husband visit Sherri and John at their condo on Sunday, February 23rd. And according to Teresa, these two seemed very much in love, holding hands, loving on each other. It was a good sign. Their marriage was going well.
Good.
The next morning, Monday, February 24th, 1986, John leaves earlier than usual for work.
Okay.
Sherri is still in bed. They'd gone to the movies the night before, and Sherri was supposed to supervise a human resources class for some of her nursing charges that very morning. And she didn't feel like doing it. It was like it was mandated by the hospital, and Sherri was less than sold on its value. And she told John she was thinking about calling in sick and staying home that day.
Okay.
John said, I think you should just go in, get it over with. She was still undecided and under the covers when he walked out the front door at 7:20 a.m.
Okay.
She did, in fact, call in sick, and I read in one old newspaper article that she said she had hurt her back doing aerobics. Now, this wasn't their typical day or morning. Sherri always left earlier in the morning than John, but on his way to work, he dropped off some laundry and was sitting at his desk just before 8 a.m. And he thought about calling Sherri, but he didn't want to disturb her if she decided to stay and sleep in.
Right.
So he waits and he tries mid-morning, and there's no answer. He thinks she's gone on to the hospital to teach this class after all. So he tried her office, but her secretary said she hasn't been in. But on Mondays, when she teaches this class, the secretary tells him she sometimes didn't come by her office at all. So John tried to call home 3 or 4 more times, but didn't get an answer. And he thought it was really odd that the answering machine had not been turned on. But sometimes Sherri forgot.
Right.
I also, in the 80s, used to forget to turn on my answering machine.
I always loved the answering machines because I always got really creative with the message.
I can't even imagine. I really can't even imagine.
I did the one where somebody would call and you go, hello. I'd say, yes, it's such as that. And go, hello.
I would loathe you for that.
And then I'd say it 3rd time, and then I'd walk away and say, hey, I can't hear anybody. And then I'd walk back to the microphone and say, if you'd like to leave a message, please,
You're horrible.
I know, it was great.
You're a horrible, horrible person.
Yep.
It's a good thing we didn't know each other in 1986.
Well, it's the little things.
Apparently. But it was something you had to do, and then you had to key in a number to get the message. It was, what a mess. But anyway, technology is, much better. But sometime that morning between 9 and 10:30, an intruder enters Sherri and John's home. There was no forced entry into the condo, and the alarm was off. Sherri is caught off guard on the 2nd level, the kitchen and dining area. 2 shots from a .38 caliber pistol are fired, missing Sherri, but shattering the sliding glass door and leaving 2 bullet holes in the drapes. She rushes downstairs to hit the panic button on the alarm system. She breaks off her nails. The killer pursued her and stopped her before she got there. They will fight savagely. Sherri apparently managed to briefly wrestle the assailant's gun away and place her in some sort of headlock.
Oh, wow.
Because the killer then bit Sherri's forearm to break free.
Wow.
The assailant then picked up a heavy gray ceramic vase from the living room shelf and crashed it hard into Sherri's forehead. The blow was enough to daze Sherri, if not knock her to the floor. The killer then retrieved the gun and fired the first shot that hit Sherri. It went clean through her chest. She began bleeding internally and would have had only minutes to live. Now, she's a nurse. She knows what her chances are at this point.
Sure.
She's down now for good, but then using the blanket to muffle the sound, the killer then fired 2 more rounds into her chest, finishing the job.
Wow.
Now, there is rope left in the floor. There's stereo equipment. A stereo speaker is flipped, and a shelf where the stereo equipment used to be is collapsed. The vase used to smash Sherri's face is in pieces on the floor. There was a bloody handprint on the wall. It's Sherri's. So after her first shot, she was able to get up. Amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
And the stereo equipment was at the bottom of the stairs. Blood is also on top of this. And a junk drawer in the living room has been emptied onto the floor. Sherri's purse is taken, as is her new BMW. No jewelry is taken. Nothing is taken except the car and John and Sherri's marriage license.
Yeah. Well, okay. Duh.
I'm not even going to say that's called foreshadowing.
Okay, Mrs. Obvious.
That's just hitting you dead between the eyes, y'all.
Wow.
Now, later that day, 2 men find Sherri's purse and they give it to a neighbor to give back to her because her ID is inside it. This is before John even comes home.
Right.
But when John does make it home a little after 6 p.m. that night, the first thing he sees is that the garage is up, and in the garage there's glass. And he thinks, this kind of made me laugh. Rob's going to be like, oh, I know this. He thinks Sherri's maybe hit something in the garage.
I never think that.
Because it had happened before.
I would never think that.
And I was like, I feel you, Sherri. I do.
Yeah.
But her car is gone. When he makes it to the front door, it's ajar. And inside is Sherri on her back wearing the same thing she had on when he left that morning. a t-shirt, panties, and a robe.
Wow.
He checks her skin. It's cold. He knows that Sherri is dead. Her face is swollen, black and blue. She's been pistol whipped a few times, and there's a large puddle of blood on the carpet. John calls 911.
Wow. When
police arrive, they remove John from the scene, and Detective Lyle Mayer is there, and Lyle is large and in charge.
Okay.
And that night, Detective Mayer concludes that this is a robbery gone wrong. He believes that Sherri was upstairs. She heard the shelves falling while they're taking the stereo equipment, and she catches them in the act. He thinks there's two people. They kill her. One takes her car, and the other takes their own getaway car.
Okay.
And they leave without being caught in the act of stealing.
Okay.
John is taken to the station. A bulletin goes out for the car. John's interviewed. He's asked were the two of them having any problems? Did she have any trouble from an ex-boyfriend?
Right.
Or did you have any trouble from an ex-girlfriend? And John says,
yeah.
No.
What?
John says no.
What is this guy's problem?
They dust the house. They collect evidence. I say this lightly because they don't collect everything. They collect the important stuff, but they don't collect everything.
Okay.
In every source I found, they talked about the fact that in 1986, Los Angeles is a dumpster fire. It is in turmoil. There are so many murders that the police are overwhelmed.
Wow.
And in fact, it's February when Sherri is murdered. It's the end of February. She is murder number 138.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
When Detective Mayer gets John in a room, he talks to him. John is distraught. He's a mess. Mayer tells him off the bat that this is a robbery gone bad. He tells John, he boasts actually, that we're really good at what we do. We will find who did this.
Okay.
But he did ask questions, did you kill your wife?
Sure.
And he says no. And he has a rock-solid alibi.
Yeah, he was at work all day.
Yeah. But he does say, when they ask, does she have an ex? No. Did you have an ex that was disgruntled? No. Meanwhile, on the night that Sherri is found, John does not call the Rasmussens.
Okay.
John's father calls Sherri's dad, Nels. And when Nels asks to speak to John after finding out that his daughter has been murdered, John would not come to the phone.
Why?
Well, here it is. I'm going to take up for him just a little bit.
Okay.
When something traumatic happens to you and someone you love dies suddenly and tragically, it can be really hard to verbalize what's happened.
Sure.
You might not want to say it or tell her family because when you say it out loud, it makes it real.
Right.
I'm not saying John wasn't without sin. I think he's in shock. He is a sinner. He slept with someone after his engagement and before his wedding.
Right.
But I'm not going to hold the fact that he wouldn't talk to her family against him.
Sure.
Not that night.
Yeah.
I think he was in shock. He didn't know how to tell them. She was his responsibility.
And everyone reacts differently in a
And
traumatic
yes,
situation.
Yes,
Yep.
and shock and grief is very personal.
Sure.
So I'm letting him off the hook for that one. I really am. The Rasmussens are not going to let him off the hook for that.
Right.
Now, they all fly out to L.A. the next morning to meet with the police, and they give their song and dance to him. It was a robbery gone wrong. You know, they've got the stereo equipment at the bottom of the stairs. She
Right.
caught him off guard. Well, there's so many holes in this theory, and we're going to talk about them.
Okay.
When she's autopsied, 2 bullets are in Sherri's body, both a .38 caliber. One of the bullets passed completely through her. And any of these shots alone would have been rapidly fatal. Somebody had wanted to make sure that she was dead.
Right.
And in addition to the wounds on her face, it was likely she had been struck over the right eye with this vase, and there was this bite mark on her arm, and she was black and blue from being pistol whipped. That's a lot for somebody who's just trying to smash, grab stereo equipment, and get the heck fire out.
Yeah, that's some rage.
That's rage. Very good, honey. Very good.
I'm learning.
You are. But they see this bite mark on her arm, and it is swabbed for saliva samples. And a cast is taken for a possible tooth comparison,
Sure.
bite marks.
Right.
But it's 1986, and they don't have DNA.
Right.
But they could match blood type from the saliva, and that could narrow down their search if they had suspects, which they don't.
Right. Even with the bite marks, they can't take that to a dentist or... Yeah, well, yeah. What dentist would you take it to? How would you know?
How would you know?
Yeah.
You need to match it to something.
Sure.
John tells the police about his day. He retraces his steps for them. And over the next few weeks, police and investigators under Mayer's supervision, Detective Mayer's supervision, they say that they interviewed neighbors, family members, and friends, but turned up no suspects. And the friends, family, and neighbors they say they talked to were never interviewed.
Really?
Never.
Why?
If you talk to all of her friends and her family, none of them are interviewed.
Wow.
None of them.
It seems kind of sloppy.
I'm telling you, it's because Detective Mayer said, cut and dry, this is robbery, end of story.
They wanted to close the books.
Yeah. Now, the silver BMW was found a week later, parked on the street in Van Nuys, unlocked, keys in the ignition. If you're a robber, wouldn't you take a car to a chop shop?
Yeah.
That's a brand new BMW.
Yeah.
Nope. Left on the street, keys in the ignition.
Surprised it wasn't stolen again.
It wasn't. It wasn't. Apparently, it'd been sitting there.
Wow.
Investigators find several fingerprints in it, a little spot of blood, and a strand of brown hair.
Well, and two, let me go back just real quick. I think if I were that person that's, did the murder and stole the car, I would park it somewhere with the keys in it, hoping that somebody else would
take
steal
it.
Yeah.
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 And clearly that's what our killer is thinking.
Sure.
I'm going to set this out on a street, a nice car on a street.
With the keys.
And somebody's going to come take this.
And then they can take the rap.
And they did not. They did not.
Bummer, dude.
Now, here's what's going to happen. A woman who lives in their neighborhood, in Sherri and John's neighborhood, is going to get home and she's going to happen upon two burglars.
Okay.
Breaking into her house.
All right.
And one of them actually assaulted a woman and pointed a gun in her face. And, John Mayer formed his opinion that first day, it's not going to change. And by golly, when that happened, it just solidified his police work.
Sure.
He just knew.
Yep.
Yeah. And so here's what he tells the family. Quote, I believe your house was burglarized sometime before 10 a.m. He tells John, who's distraught that night, just hours after the shocked husband had called 911. After more than an hour of detailed questioning, the detective assured John that he, Detective Mayer, did not suspect him of any involvement. Quote, I believe they got in your front door. I don't think it was locked. And once those persons or that person or whoever was inside, I believe they were trying to steal your stereo and probably some other items, end quote.
Okay.
And John asks him, quote, why would they do anything to her? I mean, he's crying.
Yeah.
He's crying in this interview. Why wouldn't they just run fast? Yeah, John, good question.
Yeah.
And Detective Mayer says, I don't know, John. Things just happen, okay? This is what I think happened. Sherri comes down the stairs. She surprises him. And she was hurt, okay? She was shot, end quote.
Wow.
Now, among the friends that weren't interviewed was her good friend and old roomie, Jane Goldberg. She actually lived in the condo. And she knew the area and the layout of this condominium better than even John.
Okay.
Because she lived there for 3 years and he'd only been there a few months.
Right.
But the police never contacted Jane, ever, to say, is there someplace in the house that maybe they could have hidden? I mean, is there anything nuance of this home that John might not have known about?
Right.
Nothing.
Never got in touch with her.
Never. Well, I don't. Never say never.
Okay. All right.
But none of this is sitting well with Nels Rasmussen, Sherri's dad. The robbers had only flipped a junk drawer in the living room. They knocked over speakers. They didn't take the stereo equipment when they left. They murdered her. They never go to her bedroom to take her jewelry. All of this is undisturbed. Her purse is taken, but it's found before dark on the night of her murder and given to a neighbor.
Yeah.
And the missing Beamer's found a mile away with the keys in the ignition.
Yeah, none of it makes sense.
All hinky.
Yeah.
The bottom line is LAPD and Detective Mayer were looking for burglars and they were never going to find them.
Right.
And a psychic is even brought to the condo and she gets nothing. And that person was obviously not our resident Hitched Homicide psychic medium, Catherine Kaufman, who would have walked out of there and said, all of this is wrong.
Yeah. You got trouble in River City.
She's so good.
Yeah.
I will put a link in the show notes.
Yep.
The woman's amazing.
Yep.
And she has actually worked on murder cases before, but she can never talk about them. But she has done it.
Oh, wow.
Now, soon after the murder, John left town and Sherri's murder goes cold. It's shelved. Even though Nels, Sherri's father, is calling with all this information, Sherri was being followed by somebody who looked like a woman who was trying to pose as a boy. John's ex-girlfriend was acting a fool before the wedding with the skis and the waxing, and she's a police officer. And there was also a nurse who was angry with our daughter because she was passed over for a promotion.
Wow.
Get this. Detective Mayer tells Nels Rasmussen that you've been watching too many police shows.
Oh, my God.
I would have ripped his effing throat out. I almost dropped the F-bomb. I would have ripped it out.
Wow. Yeah, how condescending is that?
Yeah, you've been watching too many cop shows.
Jeez.
Yeah. Citizen Law and Order.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1981, 5 years later, Detective Mayer retires. Connie and Teresa Rasmussen and their parents go back to L.A. and they tell them basically, we have nothing new on your sister and your daughter's case. It's just unsolved. End of story.
Okay.
So Nels decides he's taking matters into his own hands.
Right.
He's going to solve this case himself. And they put out a reward for $10,000 for anybody who can give the police information.
Wow.
He sat for days and pored over all of the information leading up to the murder and the evidence. And in 1993, Nels reads about this new thing where in law enforcement, they're using this spiffy new stuff called DNA.
Saw that one coming.
They use DNA to help solve murders and hold murderers accountable.
Sure.
So he goes back from Arizona to the Van Nuys police station and says, I want DNA for Sherri's case. Right. And they say, Sherri's case isn't a high priority. She's been sitting on a shelf forever. And Nell says, I will pay out of my own pocket for you to do DNA testing.
Okay.
And they say, can't do it.
What?
They refuse. That's not the way it works. Not the way it works.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would have gone straight to the press. I really would have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, DNA wasn't that big of a thing yet. So people didn't know how it could catch a killer.
Right.
So he's really up on everything. He has stayed so on top of everything.
Right.
But they say that's just not something that's done, private citizens paying for DNA testing.
Okay.
But her family's desperate. And these people are tenacious. Just let me tell you. So no testing is done and the case goes cold again. And more years pass by. By 2001, 15 years later after Sherri's murder, LAPD Police Chief Bernard C. Parks creates the Cold Case Homicide Unit to use all the newest technology to analyze bullets and fingerprints and DNA.
Okay.
Get this. There were between 6,000 and 9,000 unsolved murders in L.A. at that time.
Really?
9,000 murders unsolved.
Wow.
Yeah. Cliff Shepard is on this new task force. He picks up the folder with the name Sherri Rasmussen.
Okay.
He picks this one out because they're using the latest technology and he sees in the report that a bite swab had been taken from Sherri's arm. That's called foreshadowing. But the coroner's office does not have the swab evidence.
Where is it?
It's not in the Van Nuys evidence room.
What?
They can't even find it. They can't even find that it's been booked into evidence. And Cliff makes a note in the records on October 21st, 2004. Where is this specimen?
Yeah.
Enter Jennifer Francis, a criminalist at the LAPD crime lab. She sees the note and goes on a hunt. She makes it a priority. It's a personal priority to hunt the specimen down. And the crime report stated that this swab had been taken from the bite mark on Sherri's arm, but it's not even listed in evidence. And it was not among the forensic samples that had been signed out before in 1993.
Really?
It apparently had been misplaced sometime earlier.
Wow.
So where might it be?
Yeah.
Francis knows well the steps in the evidence chain. Evidence recovered from the victim's body would be held for a time in the coroner's freezer while the case is still active, and at some point would be gathered up and stored under the file number. So what if the swab hadn't made it from the freezer to the file? So Francis called the coroner's office. The swab was not on file.
Really?
So she searched the freezers by hand.
Wow.
And she finds it.
Oh, really? So she got it.
She finds it.
Wow.
The swab was found in a manila envelope that had absorbed moisture from the freezer walls, and over time, the corner of the envelope with the case number on it had worn away, but it still said Rasmussen.
Gotcha.
It's written on the front.
Right.
But evidence is stored by number and not by name, and whoever gathered up the forensic evidence in 1986 had avoided the extra effort and just left it in the freezer where it sat for 18 years.
Jeez.
But inside that envelope was a screw cap tube, and inside the tube were 2 swabs. The physical evidence envelope had been torn, and the tube with the swab was sticking out of the envelope, but they had it. But since cold cases aren't a priority, it would be a year before Jennifer picks up the phone to give Cliff the shocking news that she has.
Okay.
Francis got the lab test back. It's late January 2005. Sherri was killed in 1986.
Right.
She ran the DNA signature through CODIS, which is the National Law Enforcement Database, and there are no hits. There's no DNA match.
Okay.
But the results showed something very curious. The bite on Sherri's arm had been made by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Francis took this result back to the cold case detectives, pointing out if that Sherri had been killed by a woman, it totally upended Detective Mayer's theory.
Yeah.
And she knew nothing about Nell's suspicions, nor did the cold case detectives. Still, if the murderer was a woman, should the entire case be reinvestigated?
Right, right.
The detectives did not agree. What if one of the 2 burglars had been a female? It wasn't typical, but it wasn't impossible.
Right.
In any event, there were no female suspects in the file. The evidence went back into storage, presumably forever.
Wow.
And one reason, according to Cliff Shepard, everything is put on hold because Los Angeles had a serial killer and all the manpower was going there and not on cold cases.
Was this Richard Ramirez?
I think it was.
Yeah.
But Cliff never called Sherri's parents who lived in Arizona, and he didn't want to get their hope up. He never called and said, we've tested this DNA. All we know, we've put it through CODIS. We don't have a match, but it's a woman.
Right.
He never does that.
Okay.
And he didn't think that they were really a part of their daughter's life because they lived in Arizona and she was in Los Angeles.
Okay.
But of course, they really were a part of their daughter's life. And Sherri's case goes cold, sits in a cold case file, back on the shelf again. On February 2nd, 2009, homicide detective Jim Nuttall is tired because the night before was the Super Bowl. He works at the Van Nuys station. They'd brought out Sherri's file and given up on the case. They'd given up on it in 1986, in 1993, in 1999, in 2005, and again, it sat on a shelf in 2008, ready to be archived.
Wow.
But before it can be archived, it has to be read. And Jim Nuttall picked it up. He said he was hungover after the Super Bowl and he just wanted some light reading.
Yeah.
So he picks up the file and starts. And he's really into this case. But in Mayer's report, Sherri's blood is on the stereo equipment, which means the killer moved it after they murdered her or after the fight. And guess what? They didn't take the stereo equipment into evidence.
Wow.
They don't have it. It's just disappeared into the ether. And he's thinking to himself, why leave the stereo? Murder might be the real motive here.
Right.
And he thinks the original investigation is seriously flawed, which made me think, if you don't get a good investigator or a good investigation right from the get-go, is your murder case doomed?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
Because it was really just a stroke of luck that Jim got the case and Jim thought it was hinky.
Yeah.
And so did his boss. Collection of evidence in the middle of the blood. There was a fingerprint in that stuff that they did not get. There's a fingerprint, but it's never lifted. And the stereo, again, is never tagged as evidence.
Okay.
But Detective Nuttall looks at the coroner's report. And Sherri also had ligature marks around her wrists, like she'd been tied up. That's not a robbery burglary.
No, not at all.
So was she tied up and then pistol whipped? Was she hit with the vase after she's tied up, all before she's finally murdered?
Right.
It's been 23 years, and finally someone is really looking at this case for what it was.
Someone competent.
Yeah, and they're actually looking at it like it's a brand new homicide.
Right.
And what they decide is, this looks personal. The murder looks really personal. So they need to look at her family and her friends. Duh.
Yeah.
Homicide 101. Start with the ones who are closest to her.
Right.
Who would want her dead? And when Detective Nuttall calls Dels Rasmussen, he gets himself an earful.
Here we go.
Detective Nuttall and his crew make up a list, and there are 5 suspects on it. The 5th being the one owner of the DNA.
Okay.
So, her mom and her sister are on the list, and they are happy to give their DNA to be ruled out. Then there was Jane Goldberg, her old roommate, who too was more than happy to give her DNA as well.
Sure.
Which again is ruled out.
Okay.
Number 4 was the disgruntled nurse who didn't like Sherri. Remember, she got obscene phone calls. Her car was keyed at the hospital.
Right. She was the one that didn't get the promotion.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, she's since moved on to San Francisco, and she is ruled out after getting some help from the San Francisco Police Department because they get surreptitious DNA from her garbage to test against the sample. It is not a match.
Okay.
So, by the way, people, if you throw something out, it's fair game for the police. You throw it out in your garbage, it's out on your street corner, even if it's on your property.
Yeah.
They can go through your trash.
Public property.
And then there's number 5, the owner of the DNA. But is there a 6th maybe? Stephanie Lazarus. Detective Nuttall only learns of Stephanie, the ex-girlfriend, when he calls Sherri's mom and dad. And Nels was like, look it. I have been harping on this for over 20 years, and you're just now coming to me to say, hey, we might think it's the ex-girlfriend?
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Duh. Where have you been for the last 26 years?
Right.
He explained to the LAPD for years, she's a cop. But he didn't know her name. He just said it's his ex-girlfriend and she's a cop.
Right.
So they get in touch with the widower, John Ruetten. And they ask him, who's the ex-girlfriend that your father-in-law is talking about? And John says, there was a woman I went out with on and off for a few years up to our wedding. Her name was Stephanie Lazarus, and she's an LAPD officer.
She's a cop.
She's a cop. And Jim checks the LAPD directory, and lo and behold, there is Detective Stephanie Lazarus. She had been with LAPD for almost 26 years and was now working the very high-profile job of art theft.
Wow.
So they have a look into her history. Who was she? Who was Stephanie Lazarus?
Right.
She worked patrol duty in the San Fernando Valley when she first joined the force. Then she moved into the Hollywood office right before John and Sherri get married. She's moved again in 1985 to another slower-paced precinct.
Okay.
Stephanie rises through the ranks at the Los Angeles Police Department. She goes from patrol officer to detective, and she has a stellar reputation.
She's kept her nose clean since she did the murder.
Well, we don't know that yet.
All right. I do. Sorry, go ahead.
You're going to love this. In 1995, she's actually chosen to represent the LAPD, who went up against the LAFD, the fire department, on Family Feud.
Oh, no, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
In 1996, she's so esteemed that she's chosen to work internal affairs. She is disciplining other officers.
Oh, man, it's like the fox in the hen house.
Mm-hmm. 10 years later, in 2006, she moves to the art theft department. She is kind of handpicked for this assignment because LAPD is the only force that has a full-time art theft department in the whole United States.
Wow.
And they had one guy who ran it for decades, and he brought Stephanie in to train her himself before retiring.
Wow.
In 1996, Stephanie marries LAPD detective Scott Young. They adopted a baby girl, but it's now 2009, and Stephanie is now under investigation. Could she be a killer?
Right.
So they check on a few things. How a cop might go about planning a murder. She wouldn't do it on duty. She would do it on a day off. Stephanie had been off work on the day of the murder.
Mm-hmm.
A cop would be careful. She would wait until the victim was alone.
Right.
And after the murder, she would want to leave the scene in a way that minimized being seen clearly enough to be identified. The killer had entered the garage from the inside door and had driven away inside Sherri's BMW. Then there was the murder weapon.
Right.
Martinez said that he really doubted that a cop would plan to commit murder with her duty service revolver. And you would want to get rid of it afterward.
Yeah.
And there's hell to pay in the department for losing a duty gun.
Right.
And the Van Nuys detectives knew that most cops have at least two weapons. One that's a duty gun and another that is a backup that is purchased privately and is duly registered.
Right.
Records showed that Stephanie Lazarus had purchased a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson soon after graduating from the police academy. And Martinez suspected that, after the murder, she would have gotten rid of it. If she became a suspect, the first thing her investigating colleague would ask is, where are both of your guns?
Yeah, where's your gun?
And it would look really suspicious to say, I don't know,
right,
or I lost it. And Martinez traced the serial number of Lazarus's backup Smith & Wesson, and it turned out Stephanie reported the gun stolen to the Santa Monica police in March of 1986, just weeks after the murder.
Imagine that.
The plot thickens. And now Stephanie Lazarus is known as Number 5. And Detective Nuttall and his team are working in secret. This is crazy. They never say her name. She has loads of friends on the force, and they didn't want to stir the pot.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
They could find out if she had matched the DNA without ever telling anyone that they're doing this.
Right.
And if she didn't match the DNA, nobody would be the wiser. Only these 4 detectives working the case would know.
Right.
And get this. Stephanie works in the same building as these 4 detectives.
Are you serious?
Of all the gin joints and all the towns.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So these 4 guys, they never have a paper trail. They work after hours, and they listened to the family and her friends. And this is how they find out that Sherri told her father she was being followed by a woman who was dressed like a boy who had wild eyes. And she told her dad, Nels, about a woman that John knew from college, and that this woman had come to her house and invited. And Sherri was sitting at the kitchen table one day, and Stephanie just walked right through the front door and was just standing there.
Wow.
And Sherri told her to get out. Is she casing the joint?
Right.
Is that why she came with the skis?
Yeah.
She tells her father that Stephanie had come to her office at the hospital dressed in short shorts and a tube top. That must have been a day off.
Yeah.
But she's there to tell Sherri that she has slept with her fiance and that if it doesn't work out, I'll be there waiting to pick up the pieces. So it's all starting to come together.
Sure.
And everybody has a story about Stephanie except John, Sherri's husband, John. Everybody's got a story about her, but John doesn't. Because remember when Sherri's murdered and Lyle Mayer point blank asks him, any trouble with the ex-boyfriend or girlfriend? And he says, no. So they look through the files, and in 1991, John actually calls the Van Nuys police station just to let them know that when his wife died, he did have an ex-girlfriend who was a cop. And it's written down somewhere in the margins, I believe. And he did this for a very interesting reason. Hold that thought.
I'm holding my coffee.
But now that they're looking into Stephanie, or number 5 as she's known, they ask John more questions. This is years later, 2009. They're calling him up. And he tells them they didn't have sex until after they graduated. They had sex over the years about 20 or 30 times.
Okay.
And after he got engaged, he got a desperate call from her, and he goes over to see her and has sex with her.
One thing leads to another.
And these detectives are thinking, what is happening? This just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
He tells the cops that after that, he was adamant there would be no more contact with Stephanie.
Yeah.
Except he meets Stephanie in Hawaii after his wife is dead.
What?
Yes.
Oh, John.
So when he calls the station to say, I just want you to know she was my ex-girlfriend, I think he needed to clear his own head whether or not she actually did something.
Yeah.
And when nobody calls him back, he's like, okay, woo, Honolulu, here we come.
Wow.
Get your grass skirt ready.
What an idiot. Oh, my gosh. I mean, even if he had a suspicion that she may have had something to do with this, even if he was in denial, I mean.
Why go to Hawaii with her?
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Yeah. This guy needs to go to jail just for being stupid.
Well, he doesn't,
Yeah,
but
I know.
John also tells police that Nuys Rasmussen never said anything to him about Stephanie. But Sherri's family is pointing the finger right back at him, saying when Sherri was murdered, he downplayed the relationship with Stephanie.
Yeah. And
well,
he did.
Of course he did. Yeah. Her family thinks he was trying to protect himself, and they're holding him responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why didn't you cut off that relationship? You gave her hope.
Right.
When they contact John in 2009, he says, yeah, I followed up with the police 2 years after the murder. I called to verify Stephanie is my ex-girlfriend and a police officer. And according to John, he's told, this case is cold. It's at a dead end. Yeah. But John tells them, I'm sure Stephanie had nothing to do with Sherri's murder.
Okay.
Late in May of 2009, they have enough to send out a special task force to start following Stephanie Lazarus.
Okay.
And one day, while she's at Costco with her daughter, after shopping, she gets something to drink. And she sits down, she drinks it, and she throws the empty cup and straw into the trash. And they collect it, put it in a bag, and walk out.
Oh, man.
They test the DNA on the straw to see if it's a match. And 48 hours later, they get the call.
Ding, 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 ding,
just
ding.
like Maury Povich, Stephanie, you are the killer.
There you go.
It's a match.
Wow.
And now they're calling the district attorney. So all of this evidence has been available to the detectives back in 1986 if they'd just been looking at Stephanie Lazarus. Yeah. And why hadn't they? And now the detectives are beginning to see a pattern in missing evidence from the case file. It sure looked like somebody on the inside had been trying to protect her. Or was she protecting herself?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if ever a man had reason to be angry at the LAPD, it was Nuys Rasmussen.
Sure.
So they've got to approach this very tenderly, very carefully. They need to question her. But what if Stephanie, an armed officer, is backed into a corner and told they have her dead to rights? What might she do?
Right.
So they ask her for help on a case, and they do it at a jail where they want her to help question their suspect. But she's being recorded with a camera in a briefcase.
Yeah.
You cannot take your firearm into the jail. You have to check it at the door, then you go in, and that's exactly what she did.
Nice.
They start asking her questions. Did you know him? Did you know her? What do you know about her? Did you ever show up at her place of work? She doesn't want to answer any of these questions. She's very vague. She's all over the place. She can't remember, and she keeps saying, well, this was 1,000,000 years ago. And then they're asking, did you go to her place of work? No, well, maybe I did. If I did, it was to say, you're marrying him. Tell him to stay away from me. Leave me alone. That kind of thing.
Right.
I'm just telling you, it's very long. It's 45 minutes. It is absolutely fun to watch. I will put a link to it in the show notes. Now, because the whole time they're questioning her, they know her DNA matches and the bite mark, and she knows they're backing her into a corner, but she still thinks she can talk her way out of this.
Right.
And they do this, like I said, for more than 45 minutes. And then finally she says, are you accusing me of murder? And they say, no, you can walk on out of here. And she said, I think I need myself an attorney. And they're like, yeah. You're free to go.
There you go.
But she can't go because they're waiting outside the door to cuff her ass. And they do it, and they bring her back in, and they read her Miranda rights.
Yeah, wow.
Now, at the exact same time, they're in there talking to her. In this little room, a whole team is waiting with search warrants to tear her house apart. And as soon as the guys cuff her, they get the call, and the guys are in the house. Now, mind you, there are only a few people who know what's going down because they wanted to make sure that this highly decorated and well-liked officer didn't get this heads up of what was going to happen.
Sure.
She's taken into custody and arraigned, and the judge sets bail at $10 million.
Wow.
Good luck with that.
Gee whiz. Wow. On a cop salary.
Yeah. On February 6th, 2012, the trial begins. Stephanie is off work. No alibi. Her DNA matches. The bullets that killed Sherri are the type used by LAPD. Reports stolen gun 2 weeks later. And she has motive.
Yeah.
And when they go through her house, they find a 600-page journal, and John's all in it.
Yeah.
And in all of her stuff is a photo of John in his underwear during college. He's asleep. And on the back of the photo, Stephanie has written, I snuck in and took this photo.
Jeez.
It's 30 years later, and she still has a picture of a man in his tidy whities.
Yeah.
Then they take her hard drives, and even years later, even after she's married, there are internet searches for him on her system.
Wow.
So John gets on the witness stand, and he tells the truth. When Stephanie called him distraught, he went to her house. He had sex with her. That was why the visit from Stephanie in her hot pants and tube top was all the worse, because she knew her fiancé, the man she was about to marry, had sex with her. And how did she know? Because Stephanie told Sherri we'd had sex. And John tells Sherri he's sorry, it's never going to happen again. Don't let this one stupid moment,
Right.
I love you, not her. Don't let this screw up the rest of our life.
Right.
And when Sherri's family hears this, they are devastated knowing that Sherri was going through this and kept it all to herself.
Sure.
Stephanie did not take the stand. It did not take the jury very long for her to be found guilty. John spoke at the sentencing where he apologized to Sherri's family. She is sentenced to 27 to life. But while she's in jail, because she was an LAPD officer for 26 years, she still gets her pension.
What?
So California taxpayers, listen up.
Whiz.
There you go.
If it makes sense, don't do it.
Yeah, she's still paid $72,000 a year.
Jeez.
She will be eligible for parole in 2039 when she will be 69 years old.
Wow.
And as far as the eyes, the surprised eyes, well, I'll post some pictures in the In-Laws and Outlaws, but if you're watching on YouTube, you've seen the surprised eyes. Every time she's stressed, Stephanie Lazarus has big saucer eyes.
Really?
Yeah. I just want to say, I think Sherri never gave up on anything. She didn't give up on her own murder.
Yeah.
I truly believe in divine intervention. It was only a matter of time before somebody got that book down, that murder book down, and read through that and said, this is wrong.
Right. Yep.
But that is the story of Sherri Rasmussen and her killer, Stephanie Lazarus. 3 bullets, a bite, and a broken heart. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. Have you read any good books lately? Or have you listened to any good books? All of the Sex and Lies series books, as well as the Jane Doe series, are available on Audible and iTunes. Hotter than hell in half of Alabama, the Sex and Lies series begins with Sex, Lies, and Sweet Tea. There are 9 books to listen to in that series alone. Left as a newborn to die in a dumpster, she has no name. Tossed from foster home to foster home, she has no family. With no known past, she's deemed a perfect fit for a task force Washington denies exists. A selective assassin for the United States government, Jane Doe tracks down known terrorists on domestic soil. The Jane Doe books have been called a bit military, a bit assassin, and a bit genius. Start the new year by listening to a good book by me, Chris Calvert, on Audible or iTunes. Or if you'd like to read, go to chriscalvert.com and download some free books. And thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Well, listen, that should just be a warning to every guy out there. Good grief. John, what a moron.
Yeah, I mean, he's remarried. He has kids. I mean, yeah, he has a whole life.
Yeah, I know. And he was young and stupid.
And he even said that when she was sentenced, he apologized to her family and said, I was young, I was stupid, I take full responsibility for this. And what weighs on his heart the most, it was that because he knew somebody, because he was associated with somebody, Sherri was dead.
Yep. Yeah.
So he felt like it was his fault.
Well, hopefully he can live with that for the rest of his life.
I mean, I hope that he can.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I did read that both of Sherri's parents, her father died in 2020, her mother died in 2022. So if you believe in an afterlife, they're together.
Yeah.
And the rest of her family, her sisters, all of the nieces, they very much keep Sherri's memory alive.
Good.
It's a beautiful family.
Good.
They really are a beautiful family.
Good. All right. Well, let's lighten it up a little bit and do a little Well, Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. It's got 4 of them.
And we always have 4.
We always have 4.
4.
It's the magic number.
It is.
All right. So number 1, I'm calling this Dear Diary. People have busy lives, and sometimes the only way to keep track of important events and dates is by, keeping a diary.
Okay.
It might be a good idea to leave out any planned criminal activity, however.
Oh.
This seemingly never registered with Jonathan Ochoa, who on June 12, 2010 wrote, "Go Portsmouth, robbery happens," in his diary. The police were able to link him to a robbery as the getaway driver. And when confronted, of course, Ochoa attempted to blame it entirely on his buddy, because that's what friends are for.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ski mask.
Yeah.
Check.
All right.
Getaway car. Check.
Number 2, I'd like to speak to a customer service, please. Buying drugs is an art because you don't have the option to exchange or refund your purchase if you don't like the product you get.
True.
Well, apparently no one told this to Eloise Reeves, who had the gall to go to the police to complain about the quality of the crack cocaine she had just bought.
Karen is not having it when it comes to the crack cocaine.
Listen to this. She reportedly pulled the crack rock from her mouth and placed it on the cop car for the deputy to inspect. She was charged with possession of cocaine and fined roughly $1,500.
I have lots of friends who are Karens.
No.
Don't email me.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the Karens think it's funny. Other Karens do not think it's funny.
Yeah. All right, number 3. I love this one. That'll get your goat. Police in Nigeria are holding a goat on suspicion of attempted armed robbery.
What?
Vigilantes seized the black and white goat, saying it was an armed robber who used black magic to transform himself into an animal to escape after trying to steal a Mazda 323.
That's some voodoo going on right there.
A spokesman for the police in the eastern state of Kwara said, "The goat is in our custody."
Okay. He's not getting the bologna sandwich. He's getting grass.
I guess not.
Maybe a can.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they eat everything, right?
All right. Well, here's number 4. And this one is a little near and dear to my heart because this happened in my hometown of Sydney, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
The dreaded butt dial did a number on a would-be burglar in Shelby County.
Oops.
Sheriff John Lenhart says it all went down on Wednesday night in Sydney, starting with an emergency 911 call. A dispatcher realized it was a call from a cell phone and feared the worst, sending deputies to a home in the 500 block of Miami River Road in Sydney. Okay. Investigators say Douglas Wolliver made the call as he broke a window to get inside a house.
Oops.
He didn't dial directly. His cell phone was in his pocket and his butt did the dialing. Deputies arrived at the house to find the window broken and the suspect hiding inside.
Oops.
Now, here's where it gets great. The cell phone even gave away his hiding spot. The phone was beeping due to a low battery.
Oh, my gosh.
So what did the deputies do? They followed the sound and got their man. Sheriff Lenhart said the last time his deputies had to work that hard to solve a crime was when a suspect left his wallet behind. Oliver now faces several charges.
So here's my question. Did he have 911 on speed dial or was it that emergency thing? You know, when you hit your phone wrong it'll say, do you want to call emergency?
Yeah, because if you hold down that button long enough.
So that's what he did.
Yeah.
He held down that button too long.
Yeah, his butt held the button.
Tisk, tisk, tisk.
Butt button.
Well, bless his heart.
Bless his heart, man.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, you can go to hitchedtohomicide.com where there's a pull down menu.
Yep.
You can also suggest a case.
Yes, you can.
We love that. And we're going to get to a bunch of them this year.
Yep.
That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth right in there.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.